And we're back, learning all about the history of the Bronx with Professor Lloyd Ultan, who is, we're really happy to have you on the program, as well as Professor Bosworth.
Yeah.
We're learning a lot about the Bronx today. But you gave us I didn't want to interrupt you when you were talking, because you gave us a really good rundown of what we have here to be proud about.
Sure.
And you're proud of the Bronx.
Absolutely.
We can tell from the way you talk. But there's one thing that we can be proud of, Lehman College as well,
Right.
because it has a tremendous history.
Oh, sure.
The UN started here.
Well, even before that, even before this was an academic place, in 1866, a fellow by the name of Leonard W. Jerome built a racetrack on this site, and it was called Jerome Park.
What kind of race?
Regular horse racing.
Oh, horse race. Okay.
And he tried to attract some of his wealthy friends to his racetrack, and one of the ways he did this was to name races after them. And one of his friends was a guy by the name of August Belmont. And so he ran a race that he called the Belmont Stakes, which of course is today one of the Triple Crown of racing.
Absolutely.
And the Belmont Stakes started right here on this site at Lehman College, and was run from 1867 until Jerome Park closed in order to build a reservoir in 1890. And then it went to the eastern part of the Bronx, Morris Park, until 1903, and then it moved to Belmont Park. And the very first horse to win the Belmont Stakes was actually raised on Throg's Neck and owned by a guy from Throg's Neck by the name of Francis Morris. And the name of the horse was Ruthless.
Wow.
Okay? Now
I'm fascinated.
All right. Now, at one point in the late 20s, early 30s, there was a fire downtown at Hunter College. Mm-hmm. And Hunter College wanted to have a new campus up in the Bronx, and so they built the original 4 buildings that were here. But practically no sooner than it started than World War II broke out, and the Navy took over the campus in order to train the women's division of the Navy, the Waves, and the women's division of the Coast Guard, the Spars. And so they were trained here, and Franklin Roosevelt actually came up here in order to review the troops at one point in 1944. Then it was reverted to the new United Nations. And the very first substantive meeting of the United Nations Security Council took place on that campus. And that was But it's
now the old gym.
That was the old gym, right. And what this was more than just how the Security Council was organized. They had to deal with a particular issue, which was the presence of Soviet troops in northern Iran. And the Security Council voted that the Soviet troops had to evacuate. Soviet troops followed and evacuated, and that gave the United Nations legitimacy. And that happened right here on this campus. Then then Hunter College took it over, and they admitted men for the first time on that campus. And by 1955 was the first time that they actually had an equal number of men and women. The reason why was because of the GI Bill, and by admitting men, of course, these would be veterans and they could get the federal money for it.
And this was Hunter College then?
This was Hunter College in the Bronx originally. Then in 1973 it became Lehman College, and the very first president of the college was Leonard Leaf, who was actually an English professor at Hunter College in the Bronx, and I had him when I was a freshman at Hunter College in the Bronx.
So we have some images we want to show our audience, and we don't have that much time, so we're going to have to run through them kind of quickly.
Okay.
What are we looking at? These are some of the old sites of the...
Yeah, this is the interior courtyard of the very last house on the Grand Concourse, on the eastern side of the Grand Concourse near Marshall Parkway. This was a complex that was built in the 1920s, and several different wings of the building had different entrances, and they were all off the central courtyard, and you entered through a tunnel from where the camera is. Mm-hmm. And what you see there is a nice landscape garden, which was there, and that was typical for a number of buildings in the 1920s in the Bronx at that time.
All right, let's go to the next one.
This is a mansion that still stands. This is in Pelham Bay Park. This is the Bartow Pell Mansion, which was built in around 1840.
Wow.
And is today,
it's still there.
It's still there, and it's a museum today, and it's open to the public. Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful to see it.
Let's keep going, guys. What is the next picture?
Now, you talk about Arthur Avenue and the Italians. Well, this is what existed before 1940 on Arthur Avenue. You had a lot of pushcart peddlers in the area, and in 1940, Fiorello LaGuardia, as mayor, wanted to get the pushcart peddlers off the street, and they built the Arthur Avenue Market, which is still there. And if you go inside, basically the Arthur Avenue Market consists of several different vendors, each one that has like a little stand, a push cart without the awning on the top.
All right.
Okay. This is very unusual. You're on Broadway at 242nd Street, looking north. The stairs to the left are the last station, leads to the last station of the what is now the number 1 line of the subway, and you see a trolley car on the right-hand side.
So it's an EL train that's no longer there?
Well, it was it's an elevated section of the subway. The Broadway
still there, or
Cemetery
it's
line.
gone?
It's still there.
Okay.
And the Van Cortlandt Park is to the right.
But is that a cable car that I see?
No. It's a trolley car.
Oh, a trolley car.
Yeah,
okay.
that's you had trolley cars that came down from Westchester County, and also what is now the number 9 bus started out as a trolley and runs along the same route.
And from looking at that, how old do you think that picture may be?
My guess is that it's probably from the late 20s.
Okay. Let's look at the next one.
Okay. Yeah, this is somewhere around 149th Street. You notice that they have a cobblestone street there. The interesting thing here is if you take a look at the lunch counter or the luncheonette to the left, it says Hanover Lunch. That is an indication that the area was a very heavily German neighborhood, and in the late 19th century, early 20th century, the Germans were the largest single ethnic group in the Bronx. The posters on the boards to the right are from Miners in the Bronx, which was located on 150th Street and Melrose Avenue, and that, believe it or not, was a burlesque house.
Wow!
And but when you say burlesque, that meant, of course, jokes.
All right,
Okay.
let's look at one more picture. I think we have time for one more. Where's a cemetery?
Yeah, this is probably the quietest neighborhood in the Bronx. That's Woodlawn Cemetery, which opened up in 1863. Interestingly enough, the very first person interred was a local woman by the name of Phoebe Underhill, which I thought was very significant for a cemetery, that a person named Underhill would be the first person buried there.
But the people who have been buried here, I mean, major names.
You have
American
names from
history.
all over history. You have that. Most people don't know. Bat Masterson is buried in Woodlawn Cemetery. Nellie Bly, one of the early women reporters, is buried in Woodlawn Cemetery, and so is her boss, Joseph Pulitzer. You have Duke Ellington buried there. You have Fiorello LaGuardia. You have Irving Berlin. You have George M. Cohan. Buried there. You have some of the very great 19th century robber barons like Jay Gould buried there. Admiral David Farragut, the first admiral in the United States Navy, is buried there. And you could go on and on and on and on and on. You know, even F.W. Woolworth has a store there.
We have to take another break, but when we come back, Professor Bosworth is going to join Professor Ultan and I, and the three of us are going to keep talking about the Bronx demographically and the history of the borough. We'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.